I never thought I would rely on cameras in my own home. To me, home was always a sacred place, a space of trust, warmth, and safety. It was where I raised my son, where laughter once bounced off the walls, and where memories lived in every corner. Installing cameras had never been about mistrust. It was about protection. At first, they were there for security. Our neighborhood had experienced a series of break-ins years ago, and back then, it seemed like the practical thing to do. I wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened, we would be safe, or at least I'd have peace of mind. Over the years, the cameras became something I barely even thought about. They blended into the background, part of the house's fabric, like the old photographs on the mantel or the creaky stairs leading up to the bedrooms. Sometimes I even forgot they were there, and so did my son. But that week was different. One of the cameras in the living room had been out for months. A wiring issue, nothing major. I finally had it repaired, but in the rush of daily life, I never mentioned it to my son. To me, it wasn't a big deal. Why would I? But later, I realized that small oversight was what changed everything. That one forgotten detail became the thin crack through which truth leaked in, the kind of truth that shakes you to your core. At the time, I wasn't suspicious of him. Not at all. He was my son, my only child, and I believed in him with all my heart. Yes, I noticed he had grown quieter lately, more reserved, sometimes locking himself in his room for long hours. But I chalked it up to stress, to the growing pains of adulthood. He was trying to figure out his path, and who was I to intrude? I still remember the night it all began. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the sky seems to melt into the ground and the streets glisten under the dim glow of street lamps. I was curled up on the couch, the soft hum of the repaired camera light barely noticeable in the corner. I had made myself a cup of tea and was flipping absent-mindedly through old photographs. Something made me glance at the screen that connected to the cameras. It wasn't unusual for me to check. It had become second nature, like glancing at the clock. I tapped the monitor out of habit, expecting the usual emptiness of a quiet living room. But then I saw him. My son walked into the room. There was nothing strange at first. He moved casually, as though pacing, but there was a heaviness about him, a nervous energy in his steps. He didn't know the camera was working again, and he acted as though he were utterly alone. His shoulders slumped, his head hung low, and his hands trembled slightly as he set something down on the coffee table. I leaned forward, my heart quickening. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was tired, maybe he was thinking, maybe I was just reading too much into things. But the longer I watched, the more unsettled I became. He sat on the couch, staring into the air, his lips moving, talking to himself. No, it wasn't like that. It was too intense, too deliberate. He spoke as though addressing someone, though no one else was there. His voice rose and fell, sometimes sharp, sometimes trembling. I couldn't hear the words on the silent feed, but I could see his anger, his desperation. My stomach twisted. That was when I froze. A sudden chilling realization crept over me. I wasn't just watching my son. I was witnessing something I wasn't meant to see, something he had hidden carefully, perhaps for a long time. The way he moved, the look in his eyes. It was like staring at a stranger inside the body of the boy I had raised. I pulled back from the screen, my breath caught in my throat. My hands shook, and I felt a wave of guilt for even looking. But guilt couldn't erase Bun. Had I saw, nor could it silence the nagging dread that whispered inside me. Something is terribly wrong. For the rest of the night, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the monitor. I kept glancing at it, even when the room was empty, as though the silence itself might reveal something. My mind was racing. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew. I knew that the camera had just opened a door, and once it was open, there would be no closing it again. The worst part was that I still didn't know what I was about to uncover. And yet, even in that moment, I sensed that this discovery would not just shake me, it would change everything between us forever. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how many times I had trusted him blindly, how many times I had brushed aside my instincts in the name of love. And now, with a simple flicker of a camera light, that blind faith felt like it was shattering. Little did I know, the footage I had yet to see would break me in ways I never thought possible. The morning after I overheard that chilling phone call, I couldn't look at my son the same way. Every word he spoke, every step he took around the house carried a shadow now. I found myself analyzing him the way one studies a stranger, looking for clues, watching for slips. He didn't notice my change, or at least he pretended not to. He moved through his day as if nothing was wrong, scrolling through his phone at breakfast, tossing his laundry in the hamper, humming faintly as he showered. To anyone else, it might have looked like the picture of ordinary life, but for me, the ordinary had shattered. That envelope, that phone call, the way he whispered, "She doesn't suspect anything." Those words echoed inside me like a bell tolling in the distance. I couldn't help but wonder, was I the she he was talking about? And if so, what didn't he want me to know? By mid-morning, I found myself rifling through old bank statements. It wasn't something I had planned. My hands moved on their own, pulling open the drawer where I kept files, flipping through the pages with a desperation I hadn't felt in years. At first, nothing jumped out. The usual utility bills, grocery charges, the odd payment for household repairs. But then, a pattern emerged. Small, regular withdrawals I didn't remember making. At first, they were just $100 here, $150 there, harmless enough to overlook. But over time, the numbers grew. $400, $600, even $1,000 at once. My pulse quickened as I traced the dates. They lined up perfectly with the months I had lent him money, just until payday, the months he had sworn he was struggling to make rent, or buy books. I remembered handing over cash, feeling that soft tug of maternal guilt. I remembered the promises he made, that he'd pay me back, that it was temporary, but he hadn't paid me back. Not once. And now, seeing the numbers all together, I realized just how much had bled from my account. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. My throat went dry. My own son had been draining me like a leech, slowly, methodically, while I smiled and reassured myself he just needed a little help. I wanted to slam the drawer shut, to stop looking before the truth gutted me further. But the part of me that needed answers, the part that had kept me glued to the camera, pushed me forward. In the corner of one statement, I noticed a transfer I didn't recognize. It wasn't to him directly, it was to a name I had never seen before. A woman's name. The amount was $2,500. My stomach dropped. I flipped through more pages, searching desperately. There it was again. Another transfer, then another, always to the same name, always for large amounts. And suddenly, the pieces began to click into place. The envelope, the phone call, the secrecy. My son wasn't just hiding stress. He was hiding someone, and he was using my money to do it. The betrayal sank into me like ice water. It wasn't just the money, it was the deception, the years of trust corroded into lies. That night, I sat in front of the camera feed again. The house was quiet, but my mind was roaring. Every creak of the floorboards felt ominous, every shift of the shadows filled me with dread. And then he appeared, walking into the living room, phone in hand. He spoke in a low voice, but this time the microphone caught every word. "Yeah, I sent it," he muttered. "She didn't notice. Don't worry, I'll get more. Just be patient, okay?" I pressed my hand over my mouth, stifling the gasp that threatened to break me. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear him anymore. But the words had already pierced me through. She didn't notice. The she was me. My son was siphoning money from me, feeding it into someone else's hands and lying straight to my face every day. I shut off the monitor, the screen going black. But the truth burned in my mind like fire. I sat in the silence of the kitchen, staring at the floor, feeling my entire world tilt beneath me. Was this the boy I had raised? The child I had nursed, comforted, sacrificed for? The boy who once clung to my leg, begging me not to leave when I dropped him off at school? I wanted to believe it wasn't him, that this was some terrible misunderstanding. But the evidence was there, undeniable. My son wasn't just keeping secrets. He was using me. I barely slept that night. I kept seeing his face on the monitor, kept hearing his voice whisper, "She didn't notice." And in the dark of my bedroom, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I asked myself the question I had been too afraid to face until now. What else was he hiding from me? The following evening, I made myself a cup of tea and tried to keep my mind busy. I cleaned the kitchen counters twice, reorganized the spice rack, and even pulled out an old photo album. Anything to avoid looking at the camera feed. But avoidance never works for long. The questions kept gnawing at me. Who was this woman? Why was he giving her my money? And how far did his deception go? By 10 p.m., I gave in. I sat down at the table, opened the laptop, and clicked the feed. The little green light blinked on, and suddenly I was inside my own living room again, watching, waiting. At first it was uneventful. My son lounged on the couch, scrolling on his phone, occasionally laughing at something on the screen. He looked so ordinary, so him. For a brief second, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything, that this paranoia was just a cruel trick of my mind. Then, the doorbell rang. I leaned forward instinctively, my tea forgotten, hands gripping the edge of the table. My son sprang up, walked to the door, and pulled it open. And there she was. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, with sleek hair, carefully applied makeup, and a handbag that looked far too expensive for someone her age. She stepped inside like she belonged there. No hesitation, no awkwardness. My son closed the door behind her, and they hugged. Long, close, familiar. My stomach lurched. They sat on the couch together, shoulders brushing. He poured her a drink from the cabinet, the good whiskey I kept for special occasions. She laughed at something he said, her hand resting casually on his knee. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a friend, this wasn't casual. Then came the part that froze me, truly froze me, in my chair. She pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to him. He opened it, counted the cash inside, and grinned. "See? I told you it would work." He tucked the money into his wallet like it was nothing. Like he hadn't stolen it from me. My hands began to shake so violently I nearly knocked over the tea beside me. I pressed my palm against my mouth, holding back a cry. My son, the boy I raised, was using me as his personal bank account, and not just for himself, but to bankroll her. I wanted to storm into the living room, to rip open that door and scream, "How could you do this to me?" But I couldn't move. I sat paralyzed, watching as the two of them leaned closer, whispering, laughing, planning. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, it was the ease with which he did it. No guilt, no hesitation, just confidence, as if deceiving me was second nature now. At one point, the girl glanced around the room. "Does she ever suspect?" she asked, her voice clear through the microphone. My son smirked. "Not a chance. She trusts me too much. She doesn't even check the cameras anymore." The irony nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. He didn't know. He didn't realize I was right there, watching, hearing every poisonous word. I snapped the laptop shut, unable to watch another second. The sound of the click echoed in the kitchen, startling me. My chest ached as though someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with cold, merciless fingers. I sat there in the dark, the weight of reality pressing down on me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me overthinking. My son was living a double life, and I was the fool financing it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them on the couch, her hand on his knee, his smirk as he pocketed the money. I saw the boy I once held in my arms, now a stranger before me. By sunrise, one thing was clear. I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know how deep this went, even if it shattered me completely. But how does a mother confront her son about betrayal this big? How do you look into the eyes of your own child and ask, "Why are you stealing from me?" I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing for certain. This secret couldn't stay hidden much longer. The following day, I walked around the house like a ghost. Every picture frame on the walls, every piece of furniture suddenly felt heavy with memories that didn't fit anymore. I looked at the photos of my son as a child, his gap-toothed smile, his little hand clutching mine, and I kept asking myself, when did he change? When did I lose him? But grief alone wasn't going to protect me. If what I saw last night was even half the truth, I needed undeniable proof. Not just one recording, not just one moment. I needed a full picture. So, I left the cameras running. For days, I acted as if nothing had changed. When my son came over for dinner, I smiled, asked him about his work, even gave him leftovers to take home. He seemed relaxed, maybe even smug. If he noticed the shadows under my eyes or the way my hands trembled when I passed him a plate, he didn't say a word. Every night, after he left, I sat at the table with the laptop, heart pounding as I clicked the feed, and each time, I froze a little more. It wasn't a one-time mistake. The girl kept coming back, sometimes twice in 1 week. Sometimes she'd stay long enough to cook with him in my kitchen, using my groceries, laughing as if she owned the place. Other times, they'd drink and whisper and exchange those envelopes of cash, money that had once been mine, siphoned from the account I had set up for him. The betrayal was bad enough, but the way they spoke about me, that was the knife that twisted deeper. "She's so easy," the girl said one night, tossing her hair. "You've got her wrapped around your finger." My son chuckled, sipping whiskey. "I know. She thinks I'm struggling, but really, she's the one funding everything. She'll never catch on." I felt bile rise in my throat. Every sacrifice I had made, every extra hour of work, every sleepless night worrying about his future, he reduced to a joke, a scheme. Still, I kept watching. Because as much as it hurt, I knew I needed to see the whole truth before I acted. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, maybe close to midnight, when the feed flickered on. My son was pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, tense. "No, listen, she doesn't know. She's clueless," he said. "The transfers are still coming through. Just relax, okay?" He paused, listening. My heart thudded as I leaned closer. That night, I sat in my armchair staring at the darkened window, wondering how it had come to this. I had once rocked him to sleep in my arms, humming lullabies into his tiny ear. Now, I was strategizing like a soldier preparing for war against my own child. The following week he came over as usual, breezing through the door with that same careless smile. "Hey Mom," he said, dropping his keys on the "See, I told you," he continued. "Once she's gone, everything's mine. The house, the savings, everything. You'll get your share." My blood turned to ice. Gone. He was talking about me. I pressed my hands to my face, shaking my head in disbelief. No, I must have misheard. He couldn't mean that. He couldn't be planning my absence, my death, like some business transaction. But then, he said it again, clear as a blade slicing through air. "She's old. It's just a matter of time. But until then, we keep draining what we can." I felt the floor drop from beneath me. My own son, my flesh and blood, was not only stealing from me, but waiting for me to die so he could inherit what was left. And worse, he was promising it to someone else, like it was already his to give. My chest tightened, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The walls of the kitchen seemed to close in on me. For a moment, I thought I would faint. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was cruelty. It was greed. It was a darkness in him I had never wanted to believe existed. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands trembling so badly the screen nearly slipped from my grasp. I sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. In that silence, one truth became undeniable. I wasn't safe. Not in my own home. Not with my own son. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had to protect myself from him. That thought broke something in me. A mother should never have to fear her child. But there I was, staring at the shadows on my kitchen wall, feeling like I was being hunted inside my own life. I knew then that confrontation wasn't enough. This wasn't just about asking why. This was about survival. The next step wasn't rage. It was a plan. The plan didn't come to me in one flash of brilliance. It came in fragments. Tiny sparks of survival instinct that lit up in the darkness I was drowning in. First, I stopped the automatic transfers. My son didn't notice right away, which both relieved me and broke my heart. He was so confident in my blind trust that he didn't even check. Second, I opened a new bank account under my name only. No shared access, no just in case of emergency links. For the first time in decades, my money felt like mine. And the strangest thing? That small act of independence gave me a breath of power I hadn't felt in years. But I knew that money alone wouldn't protect me. If he was planning, as his words suggested, to wait for my death, or worse, to hurry it along, I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Not just the videos I had, but copies, backups, something I could place in trusted hands. So I made duplicates, one on a USB drive, another stored on the cloud with a password no one could guess. I even gave a copy to my lawyer, sliding it across the desk during a trembling visit. He watched the footage quietly, his face tightening. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "This isn't just financial exploitation," he said. "This borders on something far darker, You need to protect yourself. I swallowed hard. From my son. The words tasted bitter, like poison on my tongue. My lawyer nodded, his eyes heavy with pity. Yes, from your son. Counter as though nothing had changed. I forced a smile back, though my chest was burning. Hello, darling. We sat down for dinner. I had cooked his favorite dish, the one I used to make when he was a boy. He ate heartily, chatting about trivial things, work gossip, the rising cost of gas, even some vague joke about how nice it'll be when he doesn't have to worry about money anymore. Each word felt like acid dripping onto my skin. But I stayed calm, because now, I wasn't just his mother, I was also the keeper of his secret. Halfway through the meal, I asked casually, "Is everything going all right for you, dear? You seem distracted lately." He looked up, startled for a moment, before plastering on that charming grin. "Nah, I'm fine. You worry too much, Mom." I studied his face, the little twitch in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He was lying, and now I could see it as clearly as the fork in his hand. The camera footage had lifted a veil I didn't even know existed. For the first time, I wasn't blinded by my love for him. I was seeing him for who he truly was. After dinner, he excused himself to the bathroom. My heart pounded as I listened to the faint murmur of his voice behind the closed door. He was on the phone again. I leaned closer, straining to catch the words. "Yeah, she's still clueless," he whispered. "Don't worry, once she's out of the picture, it's all ours." The rage that surged through me was nearly unbearable. I wanted to throw the door open, scream the truth in his face, tell him I knew everything, but instead, I clenched my fists and forced myself to stay still, because now I understood, if I revealed my hand too soon, I might not live to tell the story. That night, after he left, I sat at my kitchen table long past midnight, tears streaming down my cheeks. But beneath the tears was something else. Steel. I was done being the victim. He thought I was weak. He thought I was blind. He thought he could write me off like an old chapter in a book no one reads anymore. But he was wrong. So very, very wrong. The day of reckoning didn't come with lightning or thunder. It came quietly, on a gray morning, when I decided I couldn't keep living under the shadow of my own son's betrayal. I called him over, my voice calm, almost too calm. "There's something we need to discuss," I said. When he arrived, he was casual as ever, swinging his jacket onto the chair and smirking at me like a man who already owned the room. That smug confidence almost broke me, because once upon a time, I used to be proud of it, but not today. I slid the laptop across the table, the paused video glowing faintly on the screen. "Press play," I told him. He frowned. "What is this, Mom?" "Press play." Reluctantly, he did, and there it was. His face, his voice, his words about how he'd take care of things once she's gone. Words about money. Words that stripped away every mask he'd ever worn in front of me. For a moment, he froze. Then he laughed nervously, shaking his head. "Mom, come on. You don't actually believe this nonsense, do you? I was just joking around." "Stop." My voice cut through the air like glass. He stared at me, startled. I don't think he'd ever heard me speak like that. "I raised you," I said, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I gave you everything. And this is how you speak about me? About my death? Mom, please. I trusted you with my money, with my home, with my heart. And you used me. You lied to me. You planned to erase me before I was even gone." His face shifted then, the charm melting away. What remained was something cold, something calculating. The mask was gone. "So what?" he said flatly. "You're old. You don't need all that money. I deserve it more than you. I built my life waiting for you to pass it down. It's mine." The words hit me harder than any physical blow could. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "But Hen, something inside me hardened. "No," I whispered. "It's not yours. Not anymore." I stood, slowly but firmly. "The bank transfers are canceled. The accounts are closed. The property has been secured under my name only, and this," I tapped the laptop, "is in the hands of my lawyer. If anything happens to me, this footage will make sure the police know exactly where to look." He paled. For once the arrogance slipped. "You wouldn't." "I already did." The silence between us was deafening. I could see the rage boiling in his eyes, but I could also see something else, fear. Because for the first time in his life, I wasn't the mother who would forgive everything. I wasn't the safety net he could drain dry. I wasn't his victim. I was his equal, his adversary, his reckoning. He stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there in the echo of it all, my hands still trembling. But when the trembling stopped, I felt something else. Freedom. In the weeks that followed, the silence from him was almost unbearable. No calls, no visits, no excuses. For the first time in decades, my house was truly my own. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I began to rebuild. I joined a community group for women who had faced financial abuse. I found friends who saw me for me, not for what I could give them. I traveled to places I had always postponed. I learned to paint, to laugh without fear, to sit under the stars without worrying who was waiting for me to die. I even donated a portion of my savings to organizations that protect the elderly from exploitation, because no one should ever feel the way I did when I realized my own child had been plotting against me. Do I miss him? Every day. The boy I raised. The son I once thought I knew. But that boy no longer exists. What's left is a man who chose greed over love, entitlement over respect, money over family. And I chose myself. That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the city HTS glitter below, I realized something. For 70 years, I thought my worth came from what I gave, from being a mother, a provider, a silent supporter in the shadows. But now, I know better. True love cannot be bought. True family cannot be bribed. And dignity, my dignity, will never again be up for sale. So I ask you, the one watching this now, if you discovered that the person you trusted most was secretly waiting for your end, what would you do? Would you stay silent, or would you fight for your life, your freedom, your truth? I made my choice, and I will never regret it, because for the first time in my life, I am free.